right? So what is that one key skill that you need to have in order to ace the data insights section? And it's not quant or verbal, if that's what you're thinking. No. You could be very good at quant, you could excel at verbal, and yet struggle with a lot of data insight questions because you don't have this key skill. And the manner in which you will struggle is to manage your time, which a lot of you must already be struggling. And the big complaint on data insights is it's very difficult to finish the section on time. And it's partly because of the lack of this particular skill that I'll speak about in this video. So I'll tell you the skill and then I'll take you through a couple of questions which will exemplify how that skill is tested. And at the end, I'll also give you 2-3 ways in which you can develop this skill. So what is that skill? The skill is the ability to differentiate signal from noise. That was a little consultant type language. Let me simplify. What I basically mean is the ability to identify and get rid of superfluous information from a question. Superfluous is something that is extraneous, something that is not required. It's just there to waste your time. Because see, it makes a lot of sense why the GMAT will test you on this. I mean, what is the GMAT? GMAT is a test of managerial skills, as I keep saying. And a very important skill in an effective manager is whether they have the ability to draw out useful information from a large amount of data, which is exactly how it will be in the real world, right? So a lot of the stuff that you will have in front of you will be irrelevant, but some of it will be very, very important. And the challenge will be to figure out what is important and what is not. Step 1 is to realize that not everything that's given to you is important. Because one problem that happens is people try to make use of every bit of information that's given to them in a question, especially in a multi-source reasoning or a two-part analysis question. Those are the two major culprits. Also reading comprehension, by the way. So it's not just limited to data insights. And I'll tell you an interesting thing. The lack of this skill of sifting signal from noise hampers good students more than the weaker students. Because see, if you're a strong student, then you are very thorough in your approach. So you will try to make sense of every piece of information, utilize all the data that's given to you, a lot of which would not be required. In fact, that will backfire and confuse you. So this one actually hampers the good students more than it hampers the weaker ones. I mean, normally being thorough is a strength in everyday life, but unfiltered thoroughness is not a great idea on the data insights section. So let me actually take you through a couple of questions to exemplify what superfluous information looks like. And do keep in mind, you will be a little biased right now when you read those questions because there is some superfluous information in those, which won't be the case if you were approaching them in an absolutely neutral manner. Though I still expect a lot of you to spend too much time on at least this first question that you will see on the screen now. Right, so let's look at this question. It's a two-part analysis question. In case you've seen it earlier, fair enough, move on to the next question. Otherwise, just pause the video, read the information and see if you can arrive at the answer, and then we'll do it together. Right, so you see, you must have read this entire piece of information, confused yourself a little thinking that this is most likely going to be a relative speed question or some complicated time, speed, distance question. Eventually, when you read the actual question asked, you would have realized it is all useless information. You don't need to know any of that. All you needed to know was the speed of each train, right? That's all the information you needed. It's a classic example of a question containing a lot of useless information. So how do you curb this? As I will be discussing later, so the best way to curb this is be very, very, very clear on what is the question specifically asking me. To the extent that I will actually write it down, like in this case it says, identify the number of kilometers, which is nothing but distance that train M has traveled between noon and 12:45. So I will just say distance is nothing but speed multiplied by time, right? I already know the time, which is 45 minutes, so 3/4 hour, because the whole thing is in hours. The speed, of course we know the speed, train M is traveling at 80. So 80 multiplied by 3/4, that is the answer, which is 60. I would do it that way. I wouldn't think, oh, but why have they given me all this information? They continue traveling and whose front is there and whose back is there. How the hell do I care? Same thing, second one is even easier because again, the question is distance. It is speed multiplied by time. Time is 1 hour, speed is 65. I don't even need to write anything. 65 will be the answer. So my point is, to avoid this problem of superfluous information, read the question very, very carefully and only focus on answering that question. Don't confuse yourself by thinking that, no, I must use all this piece of information given to me, all these pieces of information given to me, and if I'm not doing so, I'm doing something wrong. That is the way a lot of the questions are designed. This was still manageable. A lot of the times, the superfluous information will be hidden. Happens a lot in DS, where again, as I was discussing in an earlier video, C is a very popular answer. So if I show you a DS question now, it says Maria left home 1/4 hour, so 15 minutes, after her husband and drove over the same route as he had in order to overtake him. So we know they're traveling in the same direction. It's just that Maria has left 15 minutes later. From the time she left, how many hours did it take Maria to overtake her husband? And this is where I do pre-thinking. See, remember I told you, if you've seen my pre-thinking video, I told you I do pre-thinking on DS. Like over here, I will give some thought to what information do I need to answer this question. And you would be tempted to think that we need distance and speed both. But we don't need both. See, what is the distance that Maria has to make up? Whatever the husband has covered in this 1/4 hour, right? So if I know the speed of the husband, I know how much distance Maria has to make up. So I don't need to be given the distance. A very popular answer for this question, in case you tried it, is C, but you don't need the first statement. Second statement is sufficient, because second statement tells you Maria's speed, tells you the husband's speed, and since you know husband's speed, you know the distance also. Nothing but whatever the husband would have covered in 15 minutes. In case you're wondering, Maria's speed is 60 miles per hour, so husband is 48 miles per hour. So in 1/4 of an hour, this guy has covered 12 miles. How much time will it take Maria to overtake him? That is the concept of relative speed. Two objects moving in the same direction, the speed is the difference. 60 minus 48, which is 12 miles per hour. So 12 divided by 12, the answer will be 1 hour. Not that you cared about the answer. I wouldn't have done any of this, by the way. If I was answering this question, the moment I realized I have all the information I need in this one, I wouldn't bother solving. Why will I waste my time? But my point is that C will be a very common or very popular answer for this question. Again, DS, you get superfluous information in the two statements a lot of the times. So of course, by combining them, you will get the answer, but you don't need to combine them. So why should I combine them? So it's very important to develop this skill of separating signal from noise. Right, so you've seen how important it is to develop the ability to differentiate signal from noise. So now let me finally discuss a few ways in which you can develop this skill. The first thing, before calculating, because people love doing calculation, is what I've seen on the GMAT. Before you start doing any calculation, ask yourself, what does this specific question ask me? Be very clear on that. I'll go to the extent of saying, say it out loud. Not very loudly in a test center, but speak it out. Or just write it down. You want that level of clarity. If you're doing a table question, make use of the sorting function that's available to you. If it's a 20-row table, 20 row and let's say 6 or 8 columns, all that data will not be useful. So when you read a question, first identify which rows or columns do I need to look at to answer this question. Don't look at the table in its entirety and get overwhelmed by it. Same thing applies to MSR also. Don't look at all 3 tabs and confuse yourself. When you look at the MSR strategy that I discuss in the DI Grail, I give you a 5-step framework, and the first stage in that is to preview the tabs before you even start reading. So you know what information is where, and you only go back to those bits that are needed to answer a specific question. That's the first thing I discuss in my MSR framework. And the last thing, when you're practicing data insights questions of all 5 types, after every question, when you're reviewing your error log, ask yourself, what percentage of the given information did I actually have to use to answer the question asked? You will start to notice patterns in how the questions are designed to include noise, and eventually your instincts will become sharper in identifying those pieces of information. Right? So this is the kind of stuff, by the way, that I discuss in the DI Grail course. So in case you are struggling with DI, do check it out. If you have any questions, any doubts, feel free to drop me an email or just ask in the comments below. Cheers, everyone.